Hey everyone, it's Brian Walker, CEO of Retail Doctor Group and founder. Today I had the great pleasure of spending time with Alita Harvey-Rodriguez. Alita is the founder of My Academy, and for those who know more about My Academy, the really interesting and fascinating model that is the hack games, which is increasing in popularity and really brings to fruition some of the central opportunities and topics that we speak to retail leaders, CEOs, and boards about, particularly around people and planning. So welcome, Alita.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So tell me, you're very heavily involved in HR planning, and thinking around capability frameworks and so forth, and building that platform for multi-channel retail or omni-channel retail. What are some of the things that you see amongst CEOs when they're thinking about succession planning, for example?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we look at when we're thinking about succession planning, and I think it's such an important thing to think about. And where we really start with that is really understanding. We typically work in marketing and customer experience and organizational change. And one of the things that we're looking at across all of those things is what is the marketing maturity for the organization, if we're talking about marketing, because customer experience falls under that directly. And when it comes to succession planning, what are some of the frameworks that you do or don't have in place? And the first place that we really look is what happens on the day to day. And this comes back to what frameworks do you have in place in order to continue the business moving forward? If, let's say, just in case somebody gets hit by a bus. This actually happened to a client of ours. They're somebody that was working in their marketing team that was working in product. Got hit by a Hilux on their way home from work. I shouldn't smile.
We don't wish that on people.
We don't wish that on anybody. But what happens if a key person in your team gets hit by a Hilux? You must be prepared as a CEO and have a plan in place to build cross-functional teams. And this is what Hack Games, really the foundation of it, was about, because we found that most of the retailers that we work with, and Brian, I don't know if you find the same thing, is that cross-functional teams is something that's spoken about, but not really embraced at an organizational and an implementation level within an organization. So you really need to make sure that you've got frameworks in place today, that you have a change management process that you're working towards in order to make sure that you're building these cross-functional teams for the succession planning, just in case somebody gets hit by a Hilux, heaven forbid.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because increasingly, as we talk about retail channels moving more into, let's call it the relationship between media, technology, and retail in terms of the bigger players, and thinking about the skill sets that organizations require. At one level, we're getting increasingly specialized. This is the role of technology in organizations, for example. And so it's always this great adage about, yes, we do need to cross-channel fit, and we do need to get people across respective skills and cover one another. But conversely, we're increasingly getting specialized. Now, you might not agree with that, but I think we are starting to see a real hybrid of both.
Yes, I know, I do agree with that. I think we are starting to see a hybrid of both. And it's not to say that somebody who is a brand marketer needs to become a specialist in email marketing in order for a cross-functional team to operate. It comes down to the fact that, is there somebody in the business that if somebody got hit by a Hilux, can we continue to operate the business as usual without having to put the brakes on key projects to move forward?
Yeah, it's a great point. And so if you think through, as you're commenting, we really think through the organizational path. Do you think that organizations, boards, CEOs, and so forth are really investing in growth of people? Do you think that this idea of star performers, as we talked about, and people being anointed on this journey, is as prevalent, or do you think there's a fear of turnover that restricts the investment?
Such a good question. I do think that this fear of turnover has started to decline because there's been so much volume in the industry, especially from myself, about the importance of investing in your team. And you've seen this saying is that the CEO says we need to invest in our people, and the CEO and the CFO says, what if we invest in them and they leave? And the CEO says, what if we invest in them and they don't? And there's a couple of things that come about when you're looking to invest in training people. It's really wonderful, first of all, that we've seen this change in attitude, so decline in that what if we invest in people and they leave. There's a couple of different ways that you can look at your contracts as well with people. So if people are asking for training, of course, then you can, and it is over and above what their typical training contracts say or allow for, then you can negotiate based on, okay, if you leave within the next 3 years, then this is what you're going to have to pay if you choose to leave, so that you can just make sure that you recognize the return from that investment on that person. There's still definitely some attitudes around sitting around, I don't want to invest in my people, but the businesses are investing in their people, are seeing people stick around in an organization longer. They're seeing a greater return on investment from those people. They're seeing greater happiness, which means that, of course, there's less sick days. And the biggest comment that we get at MI Academy all the time is, I'm so much happier in my work now. I feel re-inspired and reinvigorated to continue on with my role. And as a CEO, isn't that's just such a beautiful reward and what you want to hear from your people on a daily basis?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that the art and skill of coaching is a fundamental prerequisite in terms of succession and leadership and planning? It's certainly one thing to anoint someone. It's certainly one thing to invest in them. And then it's the quality and productivity of the coaching.
Yeah.
And quite often businesses get to the point of probably not having the prerequisite level of coaching, skill and expertise to make that transition that you talk about. Is that reasonable to say?
It's more than reasonable to say. And this is something that we see in the leadership team all the time, is that they don't have these coaching skills. And one of the things that we do a lot of is coaching the leadership team to be advisors and coaches for their teams, so that they can empower their teams to become more autonomous, so that the leaders in the business can focus on what matters, collaborative strategy.
I think that's key to it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is really key. And the things that I think a lot of leaders are lacking in today's day and age, and they think that they're doing it. We see them like, I have an open door policy. Everybody can come and talk to me. I'm super approachable. When you say those things and then you go and do a survey of your team, they think usually the exact opposite. And this is the importance, and we talk about this all the time. When you invest in a customer experience and voice of customer project with us, we encourage you, it's not mandatory, but we encourage you also to think about a voice of employee survey and to try to marry those two things together and really find out what the gaps are from leadership, and really hear from the key strategic initiatives that you have within the business, or the ones that you don't realize that you should have, hearing those things from your staff and hearing what the staff solutions are about those problems. And that's part of what the framework is for Hack Games, is to allow leaders to gather the frameworks that they need in order to take into their organization, so that they can use these frameworks to coach people and to create a collaborative environment within their workspace.
Well, as you introduce it, they're very clever Hack Games. And perhaps might ask you, as we start to move towards our session, tell me about the Hack Games, or our listeners, about how it came to be. It's a very clever model, and about the Hack Games, how it's all proceeding.
Yeah, good question. So how it's all proceeding, we're in our 5th year. We've won a few awards for Hack Games now, and we're very, very proud of it. We're shaking up the learning model, because at MI Academy, we specialize in project-based training, meaning that if you have a goal that you need to achieve in your organization, instead of going out to an agency, let's look at the skills that you do and don't have within your organization, and then build those skills whilst we're achieving that outcome at the same time. So Hack Games came about because we wanted to allow, well, what we do at MI Academy is very unique. It's totally an immersive style of learning, and we couldn't really do anything to engage our community through things like just lunch and learns didn't really work for us because we didn't have any tech or anything like that to show off. We wanted to think about how we did a couple of things. One was, how do we put people in an environment so that they can experience what it's like working with MI Academy and understanding what experience-based learning or project-based learning is? How do we help our retailers and our community to find a way to collaborate and engage with their suppliers and lean on those suppliers as trusted industry experts? Because one of the things that I've noticed is that whilst tech companies are getting much better at this, there's still a fundamental breakdown between the people who are working in retail and then the tech suppliers, and there's not formed relationships there. But the tech suppliers have so much great strategic insight from all of the brands that they're working with. Why aren't our retailers leaning on those people more closely, which is part of that cross-functional team piece? And then finally was that cross-functional team. What happens when you actually live that experience? It shows you how can we get innovation frameworks into everybody's hands as quickly as possible? And how can we show people what a cross-functional team can do within a one-day sprint in order to achieve great outcomes? And that's the whole framework and premise that Hack Games has been built on: innovation, design thinking, sprints.
Well, congratulations. It's the 5th year. It's gaining popularity. You've got some great sponsors. And it really addresses some of the central topics we've talked about today, Alita. This whole concept also about problem solving, thinking outside the box, relying on a team member, an internal customer, thinking about external customer objectives, and really calling on that capability. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And it's a wonderful program.
Thank you. You're one of our judges this year.
I know. I think very excited by the whole proposition. And one last question, if I may. Fast forward 2 to 3 years, 5 years. How big will Hack Games be? What's your vision?
Oh, okay. My vision's big, and the team at MI keeps telling me that I'm crazy, but I'm not, because I know it can happen, because technology will allow it. I want to have this event that we don't just run it as an event here in Melbourne, because we've done something similar. We ran Hack Games in 2020 and 2021. We ran Hack Games in one day: Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, New Zealand, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And all of those regions were tuning into one Hack Games. And it's just because we couldn't travel. So now Hack Games this year is going to be the first time that it doesn't have a virtual component. But let's fast forward to 3 years, 5 years. I want to have a physical Hack Games event happening in 3 states, have heats across 3 states, and I want to then bring those 3 state winners together on a stage at one of the major conferences in order to pitch their solution to the crowd of either online retail, retail global, something like that.
Fantastic, Alita. You know, I'm writing down think big. You know, and it's the difference between vision, the X factor, leadership, and it's so critical. And to your great credit, you're certainly thinking big, and you have a great program and a great product. So thank you for today. I think for those who get involved with the Hack Games, you'll see all this plus more. For others who want to understand all about the people frameworks and how to build succession into their models, no better starting point than Alita. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brian.
I've really enjoyed today's session and look forward to joining you and the team at Hack Games this year.